You talk a big game, Mr. Shapiro, but you've never lived a day under the systems you defend. You intellectualize pain that people like me inherited at birth. That sentence, those exact words, turned the entire room to ice. The studio lights were blinding. The audience had been clapping just a moment ago. But now, silence. 1,000 eyes turned to Ben Shapiro. He blinked. He smirked. But something had shifted, and deep down he knew it. Was this supposed to be just another debate, another headline-grabbing moment on a political talk show? Or was it something bigger? Could a 32-year-old state assemblyman from Queens really go head-to-head with one of America's most relentless conservative commentators and win? That day, Zohran Mamdani didn't just speak, he stood. He stood for the voiceless, and he made it personal. But how did we even get here? It all started with a tweet. Weeks earlier, Mamdani had criticized a bill Shapiro endorsed, one that would increase police funding by nearly $3 billion nationally. Zohran called it state-sponsored intimidation. Shapiro responded in the way only Shapiro can. Dismissive, biting, and viral. Typical socialist drill, he wrote. People who've never had a real job want to decide national security. That post went everywhere. Fox, MSNBC, Twitter, Threads, Reddit. Suddenly, Mamdani wasn't just a local politician. He was a target. So, when Shapiro's producers invited him to appear on his podcast, no one expected him to say yes. But he did. And not just that, he walked into the studio alone, without handlers, without notes, without hesitation. What followed was not a debate. It was a confrontation between two worlds. The conversation began calmly about crime rates, funding, theory versus practice. Shapiro led with his usual confidence, quoting statistics, referencing philosophers, speaking fast enough to spin circles around most guests. But Manny didn't flinch. He waited, listened, and then he cut through it all. Ben, he said quietly, your numbers are polished, but they're lifeless. What do you know about being pulled over 6 times in 1 year just because of your name? Or about having a landlord double your rent while hiding behind market forces? You treat these things as ideas. I live them as reality. And just like that, the studio turned into a courtroom. The audience wasn't watching a podcast. They were witnessing a reckoning. You could see Shapiro shifting in his seat, his hands moving more than usual. But Mamdani wasn't done. You believe capitalism self-corrects, but it doesn't correct for people who never get to start. I'm not asking for handouts. I'm asking for a system where someone like me isn't born already 10 steps behind you. The crowd, made up of liberals, conservatives, and everyone in between, sat stunned. The control room whispered, unsure if they should cut to commercial. They didn't. And Mani leaned forward, sealing the moment. You don't need to agree with me, Ben. But if you really cared about the truth, you'd leave this desk and spend 1 week in a house in court in the Bronx. Then come back and tell me the market fixes everything. It was the kind of truth no algorithm could filter out. No clever edit could dilute. And when the clip hit the internet, it exploded. But that was only the beginning. This story, this collision would spiral into something neither of them could have predicted. It would uncover old secrets, force apologies, and even shake up a national movement. And Zohran, he wasn't done yet. And if this story's already got your mind spinning, hit the like button and let me know in the comments. Do you think political debates actually change minds? By the time the full interview aired, it had already gone viral. Clips of Mamdani's calm, razor-sharp rebuttals were everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Teenagers in cafeterias were mimicking his tone. Teachers were quoting his lines in lectures. And perhaps the most telling sign of impact, conservative outlets stopped replaying the interview halfway through. But inside Ben Shapiro's circle, the narrative was different. He was grandstanding, said one Daily Wire contributor. An opportunist, said another. Shapiro himself tweeted, "Props to Mamdani for showing up, but emotion isn't an argument." The facts still stand. Except something unusual happened next. The very communities Shapiro often cited in his arguments, the business owners, the suburban voters, the police unions, began sending emails. They weren't attacking Mamdani. They were asking questions. Why haven't we heard this side before? Is it true rent laws are rigged like that in New York? What if he's right about the courts? And Zohran didn't stay silent. He returned to Queens that week and held a public assembly in an old community center. No press, no headlines, just people. Over 600 showed up. Some wore masks, others came straight from work in uniforms. They weren't looking for a politician. They were looking for someone who got it. He stood at the front in a wrinkled shirt and no tie and said, "You saw me on a screen, but I want you to see me here because no matter how viral a clip gets, nothing changes unless we build something together." The room lit up with applause. Then a woman in the back stood and said, "But Zohran, what now? You embarrassed a big guy on camera. They'll try to crush you." He smiled. "That's the point," he said. "They already are." And then, almost as if on cue, it happened. That night, Manny's office received a leak, an anonymous email with internal memos from a right-wing think tank outlining a campaign to discredit him. It included coordinated media pieces, rumors about his college years, and even a proposed strategy to pressure New York donors to pull their support. He brought the leak straight to the public. On his Instagram story, he posted a screenshot of the memo with the caption, "When you speak the truth, they don't argue back. They try to erase you." The internet erupted again. But this time, it wasn't just activists or progressives supporting him. A handful of Republican voters, small business owners, even a retired NYPD officer reposted it with their own commentary. Didn't agree with him at first. Now I'm listening. And yet, the most surprising twist came not from a voter, but from Ben Shapiro himself. In a follow-up podcast titled Correcting the Record, Shapiro spent 10 minutes, 10 entire minutes talking about Mamdani's claims. Not mocking, not ridiculing, responding. Was it damage control, genuine reflection, or something else? Either way, the tone had shifted. And that's when a New York Times journalist digging through old political funding disclosures made a discovery. One of Shapiro's sponsors was directly linked to the very landlord conglomerate Mamdani had been criticizing. The story broke the next morning. Headline: Debate Fallout. Shapiro's sponsor tied to predatory rent practices. Suddenly, it wasn't just a cultural clash. It was a scandal. Mamdani had walked into that interview alone. But now he had an army behind him and he wasn't interested in revenge. He wanted transformation. What he did next shocked even his supporters and it forced Ben to make a choice he'd never imagined. And hey, if you're still watching, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what comes next. When the headlines hit, the timing couldn't have been more perfect or more dangerous. Ben Shapiro's sponsor, a multi-million-dollar real estate conglomerate known for quietly funding media platforms, was now under public scrutiny. And not just because of Zohran Mamdani's comments, because of receipts, leases, eviction letters, emails, the kind of evidence you can't argue with. Reporters began connecting dots. One of the conglomerate's properties had evicted 34 families in Brooklyn in a single month using a loophole Mamdani had tried to close years ago with a bill that died in committee. Now that bill had a second life. Within 48 hours, Zohran reintroduced it. This time with 5 new co-sponsors, including 2 who had never voted with him before. But that wasn't all. In a live stream watched by over 180,000 people, he explained exactly why this isn't about Ben. He said, "It's about power. It's about who gets to speak and who gets silenced. And I'm done watching families get tossed out like garbage while corporations buy podcasts to distract you." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The truth carried it. That night, the #Pass Mamdani bill trended #1 in New York. Meanwhile, Shapiro was in damage control. His team issued a formal statement distancing the Daily Wire from their sponsor's real estate practices, but it was too late. For once, the man known for controlling the conversation was on the back foot. And Zohran, he just kept going. He walked into housing court in the Bronx the next morning. No cameras, no speech writers, and sat in the back row for 4 hours. At lunch, he stood outside and gave coffee to the tenants, waiting for their case numbers to be called. One man, mid-50s, turned to him and said, "You're the guy from the internet, right?" Zohran nodded. "Thank you," the man whispered, "for saying what we couldn't." But just as the public pressure reached its peak, the pushback arrived. A coordinated ad campaign hit TV and radio, painting Mamdani as anti-business, radical, even un-American. One radio ad ended with, "Do you want your neighborhood run by people who never built anything?" Zohran didn't respond directly. He went back to work. He met with tenant unions, faith leaders, and even moderate opponents. In a city council forum, someone asked if he thought he'd gone too far with the Shapiro confrontation. He paused. "No," he said, "because I didn't go in to fight. I went in to speak and the truth did the rest." Then came the bombshell. A leaked email, again anonymously sent, revealed internal communication from a Shapiro-affiliated donor group, urging lobbyists to delay Mamdani's bill using procedural fog. But this time, Zohran didn't post it himself. Someone else did, a centrist Democrat. With the caption, "We don't agree on much, but this game has gone too far. Let him bring the bill to the floor." And just like that, the dam cracked. Public opinion shifted again hard. Even skeptics began to see the pattern. A politician who never backed down, who refused to smear, who responded with action, not attacks. That weekend, in a rare interview with a centrist political podcast, Zohran was asked one simple question. "What do you want people to take from all this?" He looked into the mic and said that your voice matters more than theirs if you actually use it. The comment section flooded. And in Washington, people started whispering. Could this guy, this assemblyman from Queens, be the beginning of something bigger? One more part to go, and it's the moment that decides everything. Drop a comment if you followed the story this far. Do you think Zohran's bill will pass or will power silence him again? The chamber was packed for a housing bill. That was rare. But this wasn't just any bill. This was the one Zohran Mamdani reintroduced after a media firestorm, death threats, smear campaigns, and an online war with one of the most recognizable conservative voices in the world. Now, it came down to one vote. As Zohran stepped to the podium in the New York State Assembly, the air felt tight. He wasn't nervous. Not anymore. He was tired. But behind that fatigue was clarity. He looked around the room, not just at allies, but at opponents, at the faces who'd once laughed off his legislation like a college essay with no future. And then he spoke. This bill isn't perfect, but if you vote no today, make no mistake, you are voting for evictions. You are voting for the mother who will have to tell her daughter they're moving again. You are voting for a system that profits off people disappearing. Silence. He continued. Some of you said this was just a Twitter moment. Maybe it was, but behind every trending topic, there are real lives. And for once they're watching us right now. There was no anger in his voice, just truth. When the clerk began reading names, Zohran stepped back and folded his hands. One by one, the votes came in. A few nayas early on, then a trickle of ayes, then more, then more. When the final name was called, there was a pause, then a gasp, then applause. The bill had passed by just 3 votes. Outside, a crowd that had gathered around the Capitol building began to cheer. Inside, some lawmakers smiled. Others looked away. And Zohran. He didn't raise his fist. He didn't run to the cameras. He simply closed his eyes for a moment, whispered, "Thank you," under his breath, and walked out. But the story didn't end there. That night, Ben Shapiro tweeted something no one expected. We disagreed strongly, but Mamdani fought with conviction. I'll admit it made me think. And then he followed it up with something else. Maybe it's time I visited the Bronx housing court. The replies exploded, some mocked, some praised. But one thing was undeniable. Something had shifted. Because for once, a debate didn't end in posturing. It ended in policy. In people's lives actually changing. Weeks later, national news outlets picked up the story. Not just the drama, but the impact. Several states began reviewing similar housing loopholes. Tenant unions named Zohran their legislator of the year, and whispers about his future grew louder. Congress, maybe. But when a journalist asked him where he saw himself in 5 years, Zohran just laughed. I'm not chasing a title. I'm chasing the people who've been ignored for too long. Then he paused and added something quietly. They listened once. Maybe they'll listen again. And maybe they will. Because in a world that runs on sound bites, it's rare for someone to speak with heart. Rarer still for them to win. But that's what happened here. Not because he shouted louder, but because he never stopped telling the truth. If this story moved you even a little, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more and tell me in the comments. Would you vote for someone like Zohran Mamdani? Why or why not? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and press the bell icon.